already exists today. The technology really is that powerful. While this might be a tempting reason to ban genetic editing and related research, that would certainly be a mistake. Banning human genetic engineering would only lead to the science wandering off to a place with jurisdiction and rules that we're uncomfortable with. Only by participating can we make sure that further research is guided by caution, reason, oversight, and transparency.
But what I will do is...
Do you feel uncomfortable now? Most of us have something wrong with them. In the future that lies ahead of us, would we have been allowed to exist? The technology is certainly a bit scary, but we have a lot to gain, and genetic engineering might just be a step in the natural evolution of intelligent species in the universe. We might end disease. We could extend our life expectancy by centuries and travel to the stars. There's no need to think small when it comes to this topic. Whatever your opinion on genetic engineering, the future is approaching no matter what. What has been insane science fiction is about to become our new reality, a reality full of opportunities and challenges. Videos like this would not be possible without viewer donations on patreon.com. If you want to support us explaining complicated stuff and maybe get your own bird in return, you can do so here. If you want to learn more about CRISPR, we put the sources and further reading in the description. More videos about the whole topic area will follow. If you want to be notified when it happens, you can follow us here.
Okay, so human population. All right, so we're obviously we're kind of moving to this last lecture about
Stanford University.
The bacteria and how we're right? We're kind of taking over the globe.
So we pick up from whatever the last day was, and we do our first disciplinary leap as promised at the very beginning of the course. The entire function of the first half of the course is to leap from one bucket to another, such that just as soon as you feel like you are getting mildly comfortable in one, we will spend time trashing it from the standpoint of a different discipline. This is our first one of these. And the whole point of this jump is to show on a certain level exactly where one discipline's notion of an explanation ends, another one begins. And what this one will be about is how evolution works down on a molecular level. Where did we leave off after finishing our overview of the evolution of behavior? We finished with a bunch of criticisms at the end, criticizing sort of what some of the basic tenets were of that view. First off, that notion of heritability. Heritability, assuming that all sorts of
funny enough, though, I did my first master's
have a genetic basis,
was
have
on
a genetic cause,
education
and
levels,
see those are
and
worlds
just
of
how that
differences
affects
in those words there. And what we saw was that that could be the case, that could not be the case. That's going to be what we focus on a great deal today. Another one of the basic tenets, this notion of adaptation. Everything you see is wonderfully adaptive. The outcome is exactly the process that evolution brings about to optimize results. The counter view being the world of spandrels. A lot of the time stuff gets carried along as baggage.
So more access to education,
evolving aren't necessarily things that have been sculpted into being as adaptive as possible.
That is why
Another
we
critique,
are,
and one that's also central today, is that whole emphasis on the gradual
population right now.
small
Thailand
incremental changes.
How much the average couple,
And
how many children they're having?
what I alluded to at the end the other day is going to see a viewpoint where something very, very different is proposed to be going on.
1.7.
One that will make sense only eventually when we see some pretty unexpected things about genetics and the molecular biology.
Thailand's population technically
okay, so starting off, what we also finished with
rather
was a
rapidly.
notion that there are
And that actually
political
scares a lot of the
agendas
world,
that
and we'll
run
talk about that
through
some
every
other way.
aspect of
But
the
Thailand's the only
subject,
place
and
with
if that
that is
very
going down
first
so
lecture back
dramatically,
when
that has
talking
such a
about how some of these
disparity in
viewpoints
economics.
influence
There's really
who
a
gets
haves
a
versus have-nots.
lobotomy, who
Most countries
winds
that are going
up
down right now,
exterminated,
everybody's
who
usually in the
winds
middle
up being
class
viewed as
or high,
educatable
right?
or uneducatable,
So there's a big worry.
etc. Political
1.7.
views run throughout
Why
all of
is
this. You will see very strongly in this
why
room.
don't you guys
Okay,
have
so that viewpoint of the sociobiologist,
directly asking
evolutionary
each of you,
psychologist the other day, one of the tenets going after the notion of heritability. The
Wouldn't you
notion
think that would
that
have
these
more children, you have more
behaviors
money? Why
are
would you not?
heritable, are genetically influenced, blah, blah. How would folks in that business
Cost
do
of
it?
education.
What they would
Kids
do is
are
exactly what
expensive,
we were
right?
saying, which
Exactly,
is say, okay,
totally
there's some
agree with you,
behavioral
right?
structure, and we
What
know
else?
how evolution works and evolutionary behavior and individual selection and kin
What's
selection,
that?
reciprocal altruism and evolution of and all the above. And then
Working.
they say,
What do you
well,
guys- what are you
with
guys
that
focused on
framework,
right
that
now?
explains the behavior pretty well.
Studying, right? What are you going to be
Go
doing
show
after?
me something better. Show me a
12th
better
grade, do you
theoretical
think?
structure.
What are your parents
that's
studying?
even more
Study.
explanatory,
Where are you going?
more
Probably
predictive,
university, or
and
at least
until
I'm
you
sure
come
your
up with
parents are
something
pushing
better,
a lot of you, right?
I'm going to assume that this one is right, and this one comes with a large assumption of
Absolutely,
heritability
because of education,
genetics.
right?
All built around
Education is
inferentially.
absolutely
These are
not.
highly
It's not even
structured
education
models built
on
around how
learning
genes
better,
work.
you know,
They explain
birth
what we
control
see with these
techniques. No.
behaviors,
It's
and
just
until you can give
education
me a
in
model
general
that
is
does even a
when you
better
have a
job,
population
I'm
that's smart,
sticking with this,
it
and
pushes
this
off
counts as my
people
evidence
from having
for
kids,
a genetic
right?
component
And just think about
to
that.
this set of behaviors.
Technically, if you talk
What
to
we'll see
the
is
biology
that's
teacher
exactly
up there,
where the molecular
bald guy, I forget his
biologists
name.
decide
He's
that
really
they
bald.
finally have gotten free of
Mr.
people
Ryan,
doing
yeah.
poetry for all the science.
I just
and
do
my
as a
God,
joke.
that counts as science, coming up with a bunch
Obviously,
of
like,
these
you know, when
rules
you're
there
in your
and saying,
20s,
until
that's
you
when
come
you're
up with
most,
fancier
like,
rules or
fertile
more pleasing
reproductive,
just so
right?
story,
But
I
if you're
win.
pushing
That
all those
counts
years
as
off when
science.
you're in university,
Complete contempt
you're
for
not
this
having
approach.
kids. You're
This
losing
is
out
where a
1,
more
2, 3,
molecular
maybe
stance
4
about
kids,
it all
right?
takes off.
That's a
What we'll
big,
see that
where you
not
usually have a lot
only
of
will
people
have
going
lots
at
to
it.
say about
Oh, there it
adaptiveness,
is.
it will also have
Sorry.
lots to say
I
about
like when people
gradualism.
interact, right? But
Okay,
so absolutely,
starting
access
with it,
to
in order to
education
make sense
is
of
another
this,
one, right?
for a molecular
Anybody
biologist,
else have
what
any
is
ideas what
evolution
else
about?
we
When you see traits that have evolved,
What?
what's it about?
B,
By
limit by law number of children
necessity,
in an individual
well, one is
count.
immediately talking
There's
about
a huge
our genes.
genes
In this
state
case,
right
not
now
as
that
some
has been doing
constructs
that, right?
that one
China,
wants to
right?
maximize
We've heard
copies
that.
of, and ones that your
Absolutely.
cousins
Sometimes
have only
it might be
whatever
essential
percentage
for
of in
a
common with
country's
you.
government to
But
tell you, well,
genes
you know what?
instead,
We just can't
molecules,
support this
genes
many
as
people.
information,
Let's put a limit
genes
on it.
as strings of DNA.
Required birth
And I'll
control,
assume
you know,
by now
that's maybe getting a
there's
little more
like a
extreme where you're
basic
forcing
level of
people
shared knowledge
to, you know,
about
take
this
birth
after
control.
hearing that a lot of folks came to the
You know, and
catch-up
if
session
actually, if
last
you do
week,
talk
which
to
I
that
think is a
bald
good
guy up
idea.
there, he would
But
say,
what
A,
is
nothing
all
there
built
is no problem
about,
with
all
kind
of this notion of
you know, we get in this kind of
genes
argument quite a
eventually
bit.
way out
We
the other end
we
having
actually
something
both
to do with
agree on the same
behavior
thing that,
is the
you know,
intermediary
technically,
of proteins. Proteins are important.
there's not if we did
Proteins
it
are
right.
important, not just
That's
to have
my
in your
argument,
diet
right?
and make
We
you
technically we could
run
support the
fast and
7.6
strong.
billion people on this planet.
Proteins are in lots of
We have
ways
enough food.
the
You-
structurally most important things you've got making up cells.
That's
Proteins
what it
have
is,
endless
carrying
roles.
capacity. Now,
Proteins
where do you
hold the
put
shapes
the
of
carrying
cells
capacity?
together. Proteins form
Technically,
messengers,
throughout
hormones,
human
neurotransmitters,
civilization, we've
all of
been
this
pushing
become.
carrying capacity up. Why?
Proteins are the
As you're going to learn in the
enzymes that
agriculture
do
unit,
all
the green
sorts of the most
revolution,
important stuff.
agricultural
Proteins,
revolution,
etc., etc.,
we are
etc.
able to now
Proteins
produce
are
more
the
in a given
workhorses
area.
of what
So we're
our
actually
cells
able to do
doing
more
what
with
they're
what we
supposed
never
to
had
do.
before. But the
So the
problem
question,
is,
of course,
you have,
becomes
you know,
what codes
you guys.
for proteins.
I'm throwing
And
you
this
in this
is where
because you're part
genes
of the
come in.
haves.
Our
but you
basic
need way more
issue
stuff
here
than
is
the average
this
global
flow of
citizen.
information.
You need these computers,
Genes
right? You get
specify
access
proteins.
to how many different
Proteins
types of food,
are
right?
made up of
Where,
constituent
you know,
building
if we were
blocks,
living more
amino
sustainably, you'd have to bring
acids.
that
There's
back.
approximately
Yeah.
20 different ones
So it
that are
just
commonly
depends on how you
occurring,
see
and each one has to be coded
Awesome,
for
Derek.
with a
Okay.
different
For every
DNA
complex problem, there
sequence.
is an answer
A
that is
different
clear,
DNA
simple,
sequence
and
of
wrong,
3
right? There
letters,
is
3
no
nucleotides,
simple answer
and
to this
I hope I'm not
problem.
hitting a level here where
And we're
people
going to
for
talk
whom this is
about
new,
what
this
they
is
thought
going
in the
way too
past
fast, and everybody
versus
else
what's
this
actually
is way
happening.
too boring. But
So population
hang on for a
growth.
while.
Every
in that
second,
case.
4 or 5 children
so
are born,
DNA
while only 2 people
codes
die.
for
Currently,
amino acids.
there's a net gain of
A long
2.3
string of
persons per
DNA coding
second.
for a sequence of them will code for
Current
a
world
sequence
population
of
was
amino
7.1
acids which
roughly
get
billion
plugged
in
together,
2013
and you then
and growing
have a
at
protein.
1.2% per
You
year.
get one
Am I going to
intervening
have to
step,
you gotta
which
have
for
to remember
our
all these numbers?
purposes
No, just kind
is
of
like not
definitely
really
remember
interesting,
what
and
maybe
we could
we're
ignore
thinking
for
the
the most
population
part,
might be,
which
and
is
definitely know what the
there's an
current
intermediary
population
step.
is
Genes
currently, and
at
that
the level of DNA,
is
sequences of DNA, first specify an intermediate form called RNA,
7.8
and it's from that
billion.
that you get the readout
on this
forming the
planet.
proteins. Now, everything about the function of this is built out of the following sequence. If
Then
you
they actually give
know
you
the
the countries
sequence
with
of
the highest
DNA,
populations.
you
China
will
is
know
still
the
in number
sequence of
one.
RNA. You will know the
India's
amino
catching
acid
up quite
sequence.
fast.
You
United
will
States
know the
way
protein that
below
thus
that,
is
right?
made. You will know the shape of the protein.
Now,
and you will
obviously,
then know
there's
the
not
function of the
doctors sitting
protein.
around the world. Whenever
That is
somebody
this
is born, they
critical
click a
link
thing.
between what
No, this is
DNA,
just-
genes, evolution, blah, blah, are about, and the actual
But,
things
so
that pop out
7.8
on the other
billion.
end and do
Now,
something.
I
For
forget,
the
on
very
the
critical
exam, it might
reason
say
that
7.6
everything about
billion, so
protein
just know
function
that.
is built around shape. Here is
I don't know why I'm watching that. Molecular genetics. We're not in that right now. But so that's roughly the human population, or give or take, depending on who you talk to. AMA says usually about 7.5. I would say that's kind of low, to 7.8 roughly. But look at this and really think about it. So adding a billion. When do we add a billion people? So first off, we hit our first billion in 1800. So 3 million years in human evolution, we finally hit that 1 billion mark. After 3 million years of development. Then, how long did it take us to get to our second billion? Nope, only about 130 years. In 1930, we hit 2 billion, 130 years. Then when we hit 3, 1960, only 30 years. 4 billion, 15 years. 5 billion, 12 years. 6 billion, something must happen, but 12 years again. 7 billion, 10 years. 8 billion, 10 years. And now we're expected 9 billion, 11 years later, by 2030. So obviously it's kind of slowing. We'll talk about that, right? But it's just crazy when you put in that perspective of how long it took us to get to that top, and then all of a sudden we exploded in population. Looks a little bit like this, right? I said I'd kind of show you this, but this is how the human population kind of graphically looks. And we'll see it again, don't worry. But what happened, right? Until the invention of the agriculture 10,000 years ago, the human population was a few million people. Remember that. Before agriculture, think about agriculture. And we talked about this in like the first lecture, right? Where humans were tribal. We followed our food. We got nuts and berries. We followed, big game. But then we had agriculture, and that was a game changer. We could now sit down and actually have families, right? We weren't now carrying them around everywhere. And even through then, populations were held in check by diseases, famine, and war. Then human population began to increase rapidly after 1600 due to the agricultural developments, better sources of power, and better hygiene. Then we talked about the Industrial Revolution, right? So now we had cities, but then the Industrial Revolution came around, gave us more sanitation, so people just died a lot less. And we'll talk about how that had an effect on human population in a moment. Here's roughly what a graph looks like and kind of breaks it into the different ages. But as you can see, we kind of bump along there, and then look what happens with the plague. We take a hit, but what happens to the human population? We jump right back. That's actually there's a funny kind of I was reading a study on that where they said if Thanos actually came to Earth and snapped his fingers and wiped out half the human population, we'd be back in 50 years. We'd be right back to where we were in 50 years because of that exponential growth. And, then you have plenty of jobs. You want to fill in those spaces, so we start having babies. All right, the first guy to get this all wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, as a human geographer, we had to write huge essays on this guy, Thomas Malthus. He wrote an essay on the principles of population, in which but he was the first to kind of show that human population was growing exponentially. He knew there was a problem. He was the first guy to really call this out, or written down. And then his debate was about whether human population growth causes environmental degradation. Malthus said that. Or whether human population growth result from poverty or resource depletion. Karl Marx thought that way. These two viewpoints are still debated today. What is going on with the slides here? To go back to this, I didn't write this, and you're going to kind of learn this in the agriculture unit. Thomas Malthus was right. He definitely called up some thoughts into this. But as we're going to learn, he thought we were going to hit about 2 billion and come crashing and burning. He thought we were all going to die, the human species, just because Earth couldn't support it. But obviously, we're past 2 billion people. Why? because of the green revolution, we could just grow and feed more people, which resulted in more growth. All right, so some terms you should know. Demography encompasses vital statistics about people such as births, deaths, distribution, and population size. So whenever when we're talking about population, we break it into area. And demography is the way of doing that. That's correct pronunciation. Right? But this talks about the births, the deaths, where people are going, what's about them. You've probably heard about this, a census maybe. In the United States, we do a census. I don't know, this is still sad. I think I ask this question every year. What does Thailand do? Is there a census? I should really look that up and know that. Has anybody taken part in a census? In a census. In the United States, like what happens every 10 years, you get these people coming to your door and having you fill out this sheet of paper. How much money do you make? What's your ethnic background? All this stuff.
I think they just know all of it.
They just know everything, or they take a good guess, I should say.
Yeah, I just think they just take a good guess.
Yep.
Yep.
Which I think is what I hear is a lot of the problem, right? Because you can definitely count the citizens who are paying taxes. What about all those people who are under the radar, right? But the current U.S. Census Bureau estimates for world population is 7.6 billion. So if it pops up on a quiz or something, guys, if it says 7.6 or 7.8, it's one of those, right? I'll never put either one of those. It'll be one of those. Estimation at best. Many people remain unaccounted. A lot of people are saying India has surpassed China a while ago, but it's much harder to tell there. So most demographers believe the world population will stabilize sometime during the next century. Projections for what we're expecting is low. Some people say by 2050 we'll go back down to 7 billion and then fall to 6 billion by 2150. Medium, we're thinking 8.9 billion by 2050, then start to stabilize. And some people are saying, well, we're just going to keep growing because with technology, you can feed more people. And if you can have more people, we might be up to 25 billion, which, oh my, imagine looking around you and seeing 25 billion people. But there's a high unmet need for family planning, right? Women in poor nations often desire family planning, but do not have access to it, right? It just goes back to the education. All right. And what we're going to kind of get at is, once again, it's a story of two different cities in this planet. First, we're really going to break the countries into two different groups. First, there is a poor, young, and rapidly growing. You're either that. These tend to be the less developed countries, Africa, Asia, Latin America. I would say, though, these are to be argued now. I would even say a lot of these countries are coming out of it. Thailand would have been put in this category. But as we know, it's definitely not the case right now, right? You definitely have a higher middle class, more people with money. But this contains about 80% of the world population and will account for 90% of projected growth. I would say what fits in this group is mainly poor African countries. They are still stuck in this, and we'll talk about the bad things that are associated with that. Second is a wealthy, old, and mostly shrinking North America, Western Europe, Japan. Average age is about 40. Population expected to stabilize or decline. Thailand's declining. United States is declining. So many countries are now declining in population. Now, you'll look at a U.S. graph, and it shows continued growth because due to immigration, right? Japan's obviously definitely in this. They are definitely crashing with their population. This is a huge problem. And actually, last year they opened up. Japan used to be pretty nationalistic, I would say, in some rights, right? Like, they had very strict visa requirements to move there, but they've completely opened that up. Why? They know they need people to work to help out the old people as their population gets older and older. So they've definitely opened up. Thailand is definitely going to be like that. You guys look, in 10 to 20 years, you're going to be looking around, and there's going to be a lot of different country backgrounds in here. What's that?
I'm going to be old.
Yeah, you'll be old. What is that supposed to mean? That's not old. That's where I'm at. You'll be sitting here doing this exactly. But just know that Thailand is definitely not going to be the Thailand of today. I mean, look at this classroom, right? Look at this school. So much more, nationalities, which is great. Okay, so here's a graph, right? The world total, but obviously we can see the less developed regions is what's keeping population rising. It's not those countries that are stabilized. So, to talk about declining populations, Europe and Japan, obviously, birth rates are declining due to couples just choosing to have fewer or no children. In some Northern European countries, they actually have what's called sex commercials. They're promoting that you should have babies in your couples, right? Japan is definitely trying to get, I actually watched a documentary on this, on how they're trying to get young people to date more, but it's not working. Russia, on the other hand, has a very sad situation. Russia is not because it's so much is industrialized, but Russia, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, economic collapse, death rates have risen dramatically, and the birth rate is among the lowest in the world. To be honest, to be a guy in Russia, the average life expectancy for a man in Russia was about 4 years. It's slowly improved, but it's about 40 years old, just because of alcoholism. Africa, in certain countries, the AIDS epidemic was hit hardest. So sometimes you have a lot of diseases that go around that keep a population down as well. And here's just a map of population densities around the world. Obviously, you can see in our neck of the woods, that's where population density is the highest. We're stuck between China and India, which obviously everybody knows, has roughly the highest population. Now, looking at that, if you were to look in 10 years, it's going to be completely different. The highest population is going to be a lot of brown in Africa. Africa is absolutely overtaking the rest of the world in population. It's just kind of at that point where it's about to burst out of the seams. Where am I at, guys? I don't want to make sure I go too far. Okay, just a couple more. Stay with me. We're almost done. Yes, we have one more. Okay, one more. Easy, right? No, what's going on? I got kicked off the internet. Hold on. 5-second break. Come on. I hate this school's internet. Now it's on video. Okay, last one, guys. Hold on. Bring it back. Let's just finish this out. Let's bring this back. So, how do we get to zero population growth? Well, this occurs when births plus immigration in a population. Asahi, turn around, please. One more, I'm almost done. Occurs when births plus immigration in a population equals deaths plus immigration, right? We talked about that in last lecture. So zero population growth is a rate of when every couple has roughly about 2.1 children per couple. That is what is needed to keep a population stable. Not 2.0 because some people do not have children and some children do not survive to reproductive age. So roughly, you're going to have to eventually get married and have 2.1 children if you want to keep Thailand's population stable. Yes? Why the decimal? It's because that slight part of children that die before they get to reproductive age. Yep. So there's your goal, I guess. Fertility rates have declined everywhere except Africa. Like I said, China is going down. India is actually starting to stabilize. It's now Africa where we see is going to be the biggest problem. Now, guys, I can't stress this enough. Africa is going to have a lot of problems. That's what we're going to get at in environmental science. Africa by far is probably going to be the worst hit possibly. It's like they have superstorms colliding over that poor continent. They're going to have way more people. Global warming is going to affect them the hardest. They have absolutely huge food shortages and expected to even more so in the future. Obviously not very stable governments. That continent is going to be in trouble for a long time, if not more so in the future. And we could get into that argument about whose fault that is. But I mean, a lot of the Western countries kind of set them up for failure in a lot of ways, right? I'll just read this last part though. But fertility rates have declined everywhere except for Africa. China had the one-child policy, which they're now kind of letting loose. Abortion and forced sterilization, and then think about though that when you do require, this kind of gets into the conversation about why China's one-child policy was not good. Obviously, with that being said, there's a much higher boy population in China now than there are girls. Why is that? Infanticide, right? Many families wanted to carry on the child, the family name. And you can do that through the boy. So unfortunately, a lot of girls were aborted. Well, I want you to think about this, ladies and gentlemen. And that's not just happening in China, many countries. What happens when you get a nation just of men?
No babies.
No reproduction, right? The population is going to crash. But you're going to get, on average, you can talk to Mr. Bryan about this, right? Men are more aggressive. You're going to get more nationalistic views. You're going to get more probably confrontation, right? What's going to happen in China when all those men then become of age and you have a population of men who aren't getting married, aren't having kids? There's probably going to be a little bit more frustration, right? So what's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years, right? These are things you need to think about. Okay, and we'll end on that positive note. All right, guys, we're going to talk population pyramids next in the other one, but we're stopping there. This one's huge. Population pyramids and stages are your two biggest things to learn here, and they're coming up in the next lecture. We kind of just got the information out there. But stop there. Relax. Take a break. Do lab now, of course, but that's it for this. Yeah, take